Hello guys, in this tutorial I want to talk about the HTML data attribute and the JavaScript dataset property. And I'm going to try to explain what the data attribute is and how to use it in JavaScript with the dataset property. All right, so data attributes, they are custom HTML attributes that allow you to store extra information directly on HTML elements. All right, so it is very useful to include your data attributes on HTML elements as much as needed. And these attributes are intended to store private data for the page or application, right? Which you can access using your JavaScript. Okay, now there are rules that guide the use of data attributes, and you can see right here I've specified the data attribute. So the first rule is that it must start with data followed by hyphen, okay, and then the name after the hyphen, which in this case I use status. It can be anything. You can change this to anything. You can change it to name, to value, to action, to whatever you want. It can be to role, ID, and position, whatever that will describe the data that you want to store inside this data attribute. That should be the name. So after that, the attributes name is case sensitive. What does that mean? Here I'm using all lowercase. If I change this S to uppercase and I want to access it with a lowercase in JavaScript, it's not going to be recognized. That is one. Two, if I use hyphen status, okay, let me put something here. If I use page hyphen status in JavaScript, this is going to be converted into a camel case, which means into something like this. That's how JavaScript would convert a hyphenated name. Okay, so this just to explain that name in your HTML data attribute is case sensitive, and if you have hyphenated names, it will be converted to camel case in JavaScript. Why then is it important to use this data attribute? It helps to store extra information on HTML elements, and it also makes the HTML element to be self-contained and more semantic. Okay, and it also helps us to pass information between HTML and JavaScript very easily. So, but then you need to take note of something. You should not use this to store sensitive data like password, like some secret keys, API keys, and stuff like that. You should not use this data attribute for that. So that is for data attributes in HTML. And right on the screen here, I have a button with a letter of follow, which you can see here. And I set my data attribute status to follow. So in this JavaScript, I'm going to grab this button with this ID. Okay, I'm going to be typing everything, okay, so that you can follow. So I'll just call this the follow btn, and I'll pass it to documents. Sorry for that. Document dot get element by ID, and I'm going to pass in here the ID which I have here as follow btn. I'll pass it inside here and make sure you put in your semicolon. So what next do I need to do? At this point I need to pass in an event listener because I want to show you how this data attribute works and how it can be accessed in JavaScript. Right after I grab my element, what I need to do is I need to pass an event listener to the button. So I'm going to call follow, oh, sorry, follow btn dot add event listener, and this event listener is going to be listening to clicks because I want to be clicking on this button, so it should listen to click. And I'm going to give it a callback function. Okay, and right after that I open for my block of code. So what do I need to do? I want to check the current status. I want to keep trace of the status, just like in our Facebook pages where we have follow and unfollow button on Facebook. This is exactly how what I'm creating here is going to work, and that is the job of data status and data set property in JavaScript. Right here I'm going to create another variable and I'll call it current status, and I'm going to pass it to the button. I want to grab the current status of this button. I'm going to pass it to this follow btn dot data set, sorry for that, dot the name of my data set, which in this case is status. So I put it right in here. Okay, so if I log out the current status, if I log out the current status, you see the current status when I click is follow. Now where am I getting this from? I'm getting it from this data attribute with this follow. So if I change this to, if I change the value to maybe unfollow and I click, you'll see unfollow. So how am I accessing this? Accessing this value by using this data set here. All right, then let me reverse it back because I want it to be follow. So I'm going to use my if statement, and I'm going to check if the current, sorry, if the current status is exactly equal to follow, then I need to do something here. So if the current status of the button is follow, so I would like to say the button text, so the follow button docs text contents, okay, that should be, if it is follow, the text content should be on follow, sorry, okay, let's use this, it should be on follow. And then not only that, I also want to change the status of the button, so I'll call the follow button dot data set again dot status, okay, and You see, with this data set, I can also change the data that I stored inside my HTML data attribute. So I'll change this to onFollow, okay, which means I've updated the data set attribute. Okay, I'm going to save this. Otherwise, so I'm going to call the else statement. Otherwise, the button, uh, otherwise, the button dot text contents, all right, should be followed, and I equally update the button data set. So when I save right now, I click, you see, if it is follow, I should change it to unfollow. But when it is um, otherwise, I should leave it to follow. But when I click on it again, it returns. I click. So you see, that is how our Facebook page follow buttons work, where you have to click a button when you are following someone on a Facebook page. You see, you click on a button to show you when you are following, it should be showing unfollow. So that means you are following, and at this point, the data sets that I created, the value has changed from follow to unfollow. And when I click it again, it returns back to original data, and then what is here has changed. So this is exactly how this data set works, and how to access the data set in JavaScript using, how to access the data attributes in JavaScript using dataset. So with dataset property in JavaScript, you can access the data stored in your data attribute in HTML using the data attributes name, and you can also change or modify the data stored in your data attribute in HTML using JavaScript. So I hope you've learned something on how this data attribute and data set works. If you have any question, put it on the comment section. And if you are just watching my video for the first time, do not hesitate to like, comment, share videos, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys.